On June 19, 1944, U.S. Navy and Imperial Japanese forces were engulfed in a series of brutal clashes where the smoke of battery salvos filled the ambiance, and the sky was the playground of carrier fighters. The first battle of the Philippine Sea was raging on, and the combat zone was hot. Lieutenant Alex Vraciu was flying a rugged but versatile Grumman F6F Hellcat when he spotted an approaching formation of Japanese dive bombers that were bound for a carrier. Vraciu did not hesitate and immediately intercepted the hostile formation at full speed, tearing them apart with the accurate fire of his Hellcat's 6 50 caliber machine guns. One by one, the bombers began to go down. In a span of just 8 minutes, the American pilot took them down with devastating effect. When Vraciu landed for a refuel, he realized he had taken them down with only 360 rounds of ammunition, a true testament to what the Hellcat could do. Improved Wildcat. The Grumman F4F Wildcat carrier-based fighter was introduced to the U.S. Navy in December of 1940, 1 year before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Following its commission, Grumman began working on a successor. The Wildcat was considered a solid aircraft, but it was outperformed by the reliable Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0, which could reach 331 miles per hour and was more agile for dogfights. This was more evident during the first months of the war in the Pacific, especially at the Battle of the Coral Sea and the Battle of Midway, where Navy pilots struggled to deliver decisive blows to the swift Mitsubishi Zeros. Grumman's F6F Hellcat was considered an improved variant of the Wildcat, but it quickly evolved into its own platform. Meanwhile, the Navy intended to replace the Wildcat with the Vought F4U Corsair, but development was slowed by the crash of the only prototype. According to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, quote, as a precaution against possible delays in the Corsair reaching the fleet, in June 1941, the Navy asked Grumman to develop an improved version of the Wildcat. The Grumman X-F6F1 prototype physically resembled the Wildcat, but required some internal and external upgrades. The most important was a more powerful engine to even the odds against Japanese aircraft. To be able to use a more considerable power plant, the prototype required a larger propeller and consequently taller landing gear for additional ground clearance. All these performance and weight additions required a larger wing area, among other changes. The preliminary details essentially made the model a new aircraft that would retain some of the features of its predecessor, but would innovate in many others. The largest wings. After going back to the drawing board, Grumman co-founder Leroy Grumman and his team of engineers incorporated the ideas shared by veteran pilots and the U.S. Navy Bureau of Aeronautics. In the aftermath of the Battle of Midway, Grumman engineer Jake Swerble went to Hawaii to hear the suggestions that Commander John S. Jimmy Thatch had in mind to develop an American fighter that could overpower the Zero. Thatch was a Wildcat ace who'd come up with the Thatch Weave defensive maneuver when engaging hostile aircraft over the Pacific. Additional suggestions were given by another ace, Lieutenant Commander Butch O'Hare, who toured the Grumman facility in April of 1942. One of the main modifications that made the Hellcat different from the Wildcat was the location of the cockpit, which was placed higher in the fuselage to provide additional visibility for the pilot. As a result, the forward section of the fuselage was sloped down to the engine cowling. The Hellcat also replaced the hand-cranked main landing gear of the Wildcat with hydraulically actuated landing gear struts, and its wings were mounted lower in the fuselage and could be hydraulically folded. These wings followed Grumman's patented stow-wing design. Folding the carrier-based aircraft was critical, as the Hellcat would become the fighter with the largest wings of World War II, with a total wing area of 334 square feet. Although the Hellcat bore a familiar resemblance to the Wildcat, it was significantly heavier and larger. It had a length of 34 feet, a height of 13 feet, and a maximum takeoff weight of 15,415 pounds. Quick development. Grumman chief engineer William Schwendler followed the simplistic and rugged style of Grumman aircraft and built the components of the Hellcat with twice the strength required in the specifications. The result was a tough, resilient fighter that was easy to produce and manufacture. The first Hellcat took to the skies in June of 1942 with a 1,600 horsepower Wright R2600 Cyclone engine. As expected, test pilots praised the aircraft, which achieved a maximum speed of 391 miles per hour and had an approximate combat range of 945 miles. Also, its service ceiling was over 37,000 feet, with an outstanding rate of climb of 2,600 feet. Grumman was so confident in the design that production started in October of 1942, while the prototype was still undergoing additional testing with its armament. The bold move earned Grumman a Navy production contract in January of 1943. Although the company struggled to grow its facility to produce more aircraft in less time, it unquestionably delivered. The model's main armament comprised 6 50-caliber M2 Browning machine guns with 400 rounds per gun fitted in the wing's outer sections. Furthermore, the aircraft could carry up to 2,000 pounds of bombs to attack Japanese ships or ground troops entrenched deep inside the Pacific Islands. The Hellcat saw action for the first time in early September of 1943, when several fighters from USS Independence took down the Japanese Emily flying boat aircraft. In November of 1943, several Hellcats flew over the island of Tarawa to support the U.S. Marines. During the battle, the Hellcats claimed over 30 Zero shootdowns at the cost of just one of their own. Days later, several other Hellcats and Corsairs engaged Japanese fighters near Rabaul, New Britain, and took down over 50 aircraft with minimal casualties. The time of the Hellcat had come, and the Pacific was its new playground. Conquering the Pacific. The Hellcat quickly became the default aircraft of the U.S. Navy and the Marines. On December 4th, 1943, an intense series of dogfights broke out between 90 Hellcats and over 50 A6M-Zeros. In the aftermath of the aerial battle, the Hellcats emerged victorious, claiming 28 Japanese Zeros and losing only 3 of their own. Other similar series of aerial fights showed the Hellcat was superior to the Zero in most aspects, except for the Zero's impressive turning ability at slower speeds. Also, the 6 50-caliber guns of the Hellcat were no match for the lightly armored Zeros, which were made for swift attacks and not long dogfights against heavier fighters. The Japanese would eventually even the odds with the Kawanishi N1K George, but the Hellcat was so effective that it would not be modified until the last stages of the war. The F6F5 variant featured additional armor for the cockpit and fuselage, an improved R2800 10W engine, and spring tabs on the ailerons to bolster maneuverability. Grumman also introduced Hellcats fit for night and reconnaissance operations. These were standard Hellcats, equipped with the AN/APS-4 radar mounted behind the right wing, and additional radar controls in the control panel. Armament-wise, this variant could also fire rockets to complement its bomb load, and some night fighters were also equipped with 2 M2 cannons, or a mix of one 20mm cannon and 2 50-caliber machine guns. Hellcats over Europe. Although the Grumman F6F Hellcat made quite a reputation in the Pacific against the Japanese Empire, it also fought over the skies of Europe and the Mediterranean. The British Royal Navy received over 1,250 Hellcats as part of the Lend-Lease Act, and they renamed the aircraft the Grumman Gannet and later Marlet. The aircraft were deployed in 1944 and saw action off the coast of Norway, the Mediterranean, and the Far East, where some units joined the fight against the Japanese. Then, in April of 1944, a unit of Royal Navy Marlets attacked the battleship Tirpitz at Kafjord in Norway. Although they did not deliver the blow that sealed the fate of the Kriegsmarine ship, they were crucial for the operation. The Marlets also took part in Operation Overlord in June of 1944, and the subsequent Allied invasion of southern France in September of that year. The Marlets faced several Hinkel bombers, ME-109s and BF-109s, always showing impressive performance. Last years. Between June of 1942 and November of 1945, Grumman manufactured over 12,275 Hellcats from Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation in Bethpage on New York's Long Island. It was the largest number of aircraft ever produced at a single facility. When the war ended, the Hellcat was replaced by the F-8F Bearcat, but was still used for second-line duties. Some became target drones, while others were packed with explosives and used to blow up bridges in the Korean War. The Hellcat also became the first aircraft used by the Navy's Blue Angels demonstration squadron. Ultimately, the rugged aircraft was credited with destroying over 5,200 aircraft while in service with the U.S. Navy, Marine Corps, and the Royal Navy. And of the 6,477 aerial victories claimed by Navy pilots during World War II, an impressive 4,947 were attributed to F6F Hellcat pilots. Thank you for watching our video. Please like and subscribe to our Dark Documentaries channels to find more exciting historical and military content. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified of our newest videos. Stay tuned.